rise and join us in saying the Pledge of Allegiance.
Good evening and welcome. My name is Ann Burton Walsh. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of Ridgewood, tonight's sponsor of the Village Council Candidates Night. To begin tonight's forum, I would like to welcome Girl Scout Troop 94185 to salute the flag.
Ladies and gentlemen, please rise and join us
in saying the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Girl Scouts dismissed.
Thank you very much. Encouraging informed voting has been the central mission of the League of Women Voters for nearly 100 years. The League is committed to providing fact-based information about issues and positions candidates take on those issues to help voters make their own decisions and participate in the political process. Our goal at the local, state, and national level is to promote the active and informed participation in government in order to improve and impact public policy through nonpartisan advocacy. Your participation this evening helps us to carry out our mission. Please note that the League of Women Voters never supports or opposes candidates for office or political parties. Any use of the League name or footage from the debate in a campaign has not been authorized by the League of Women Voters. Thank you again for coming this evening. If you would like to participate in our efforts to hold candidates' nights or get out the vote, the LWV of Ridgewood welcomes members, both women and men. Please visit our website, www.ridgewoodlwv.com. As a courtesy to the candidates, please turn off all cell phones and other electronic devices now, and please refrain from taking photographs or videos during the debate. I would now like to introduce Barbara King as our moderator this evening. Ms. King is a member of the Fair Lawn League of Women Voters. In keeping with our nonpartisan stance, we do not engage members of the Ridgewood League to moderate Ridgewood debates. Ms. King will introduce the candidates and explain the format of tonight's debate. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you very much, Ann. A few rules we have to go through. Okay. This forum is devoted to hearing the views of the candidates running for council. To ensure that the meeting is informative, all the following will have to be observed. The questions and candidates' remarks must follow League policy of being concerned with issues and not personalities. I will not ask any questions that have any abusive, personalized, or irrelevant remarks in them. Please, we ask that you hold your applause until the very end of the evening so that we will have more time to devote to the questions and answers. At this point, I would say we have so many more questions submitted than we will have time for, that unless you have a really burning issue that you'd like to ask about, hold your cards. Let's see. This evening, the forum is being broadcast live on Channel 77 Cablevision and Channel 34 Fios. The forum is also being streamed on YouTube at www.ridgewood.nj.net. The candidates were asked to and did sign an agreement that they will not use anything from the debate in their campaign literature. And we will now proceed to the important part of the evening. I will introduce the candidates. They each have 2 minutes to make an opening statement. The candidates were sent 2 questions from the League that they could prepare their answers to, and will present them this evening. The answers will be a minute and a half in length. After each candidate has answered question 1, there will be 5 minutes for what we call crosstalk. And the same thing will happen with question 2. Then there will be approximately 65 to 70 minutes where we will have the questions from the audience, and the answers given by the candidates will be a minute and a half. Then we will have closing statements of a minute and a half. So at approximately 9:17, we will be cutting off the Q&A and going to closing statements. We are finishing at 9:30. Let's see. As already requested, please keep your phones off so they will not interrupt the proceedings. The candidates drew lots to determine the order of opening statements. Before we get to that, I do want to mention that we have 2 young ladies keeping time in front. When there's 30 seconds left for the candidate to answer, a sign will go up that says 30 seconds. And then there will be a sign at the end of the minute and a half or 2 minutes that says stop. The candidates can finish a sentence, but not a run-on sentence. And I will say thank you if you don't finish. Okay, so as I said, they drew lots to determine the order of speaking, and our first speaker is candidate Michael Seaton. He has 2 minutes.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. I just wanted to thank the League of Women Voters for putting this together, and everyone who's attending, and the staff that helped prepare the room. My name is Michael Seaton. I'm currently the Deputy Mayor of Ridgewood. I've been in that position since 2016, and I've been on the council since 2014. I've served on the Community Center Advisory Board, Citizen Safety Advisory Committee, and the Open Space Committee. I also serve on the Ridgewood Environmental Advisory Committee, the Shade Tree Commission, and the Green Team. I'm core trained and certified by the state, which helps out tremendously with the Shade Tree Commission. I'm also a member of the League of Women Voters, the Knights of Columbus, and I'm a parishioner at Our Lady of Mount Carmel Church. I've also served on several ad hoc committees, most notably the Gradeon ad hoc committee and the Shedler ad hoc committee, and a landscaping committee several years ago. And then there's so many other subcommittees that I've been on, it's too lengthy to mention right now. As a former journalist, I worked for the Ridgewood News for almost 4 years, so I attended these meetings for close to 4 years. And when I left that paper in 2011, I came back as a resident, and I continued to come to these meetings. So before I even ran, I was attending 6 years' worth of council meetings, planning board meetings, and the occasional zoning board meeting. This has given me an in-depth insight into village government and a great understanding of our shared history. The commitment of time is immense if you really want to get things done. The mayor and I put in as much time as we possibly can to move this village forward and take us all in the right direction. Thank you.
Please hold your applause. Thank you. Our next candidate is Janice Willett. 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you to the League for hosting tonight, and to Ms. King for moderating, and to all of you here for coming out tonight, as well as to those of you who might be watching live or later. I'd like to start by thanking Deputy Mayor Seaton and Mayor Knudsen for their service to the village. In years to come, you will always be referred to as having served as Mayor and Deputy Mayor of Ridgewood, which is an honor that you have earned, and I respect your dedication over the last 4 years. I mean that. But tonight is about who should lead Ridgewood for the next 4 years. Ridgewood has been home to me for a long time. My parents moved us here in 1966 because my mother liked the hanging flower baskets on the lampposts downtown. My husband and I moved back here 32 years ago to raise our 3 children for the same reasons that most of you live here: great schools, a charming downtown, and proximity to Manhattan. We do seem to have become a divided community, sadly, but I hope we can at least agree that I am well qualified to serve on the council. I have a degree in economics from the University of Michigan, And I was sort of hoping somebody would say go blue, but not. I have an MBA in finance and corporate accounting from the University of Rochester. I've worked at several first-rate institutions, including J.P. Morgan Chase, Morgan Stanley, and the Boston Consulting Group, and I have a 30-year track record of community involvement, including leadership roles at a number of volunteer organizations and nonprofits. And I encourage you to look at the League of Women Voters candidate questionnaires on the League website for details on all 4 candidates. I've knocked on a lot of doors here in town these last few weeks, and I'm pleased to report that we have many smart, thoughtful residents, unlike, I'm sorry to say, the uninformed hate mongers on the Ridgewood blog. Note to the blog, I will try to stay awake tonight. You all have an important decision to make on Tuesday. You have to decide which candidates are better qualified, which candidates more closely share your vision of Ridgewood, and most important, what set of facts we are operating with, and more on that over the course of the evening. Again, thank you for being here, and I look forward to sharing my plans for Ridgewood.
Thank you. Our next candidate is Alexandra Harwin.
I'd like to...
Oh dear.
Are we pausing for technical
Joan, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters, my fellow candidates, and all of you here tonight in person and watching. My name is Alexandra Harwin. I live on Wall Street with my husband Noah and our 2 daughters, Lori, who's 4 years old, and Franny, who's 1.5. I'm running for the Village Council because Ridgewood is my family's home. I'm running for the Village Council not because of what's wrong in Ridgewood, but because of what's right. Our village does so much well, and we have excellent village employees. But our taxes are hard to bear. With the recent federal tax changes, it's more important than ever that we keep local taxes under control. We need a fresh voice. Our downtown is a unique, defining asset, but lack of parking and outdated restrictions have left it struggling. We need a fresh voice. We are a diverse community, different races and religions, ethnicities, sexual orientations, of course, individuals and families of all ages, and yes, lengths of time living in Ridgewood. That's our strength. It's important to us. The Village Council needs to send that message. We need a fresh voice. No candidate has the solutions to all of our problems, but I have a lot of ideas, as you'll hear tonight. As a civil rights attorney, I am highly trained in analyzing difficult issues from all sides. I have proven experience breaking deadlocks, developing creative solutions, reaching consensus, and putting plans into action. Those are the skills I will put to work for us on the Village Council. I can be the fresh voice that we need in Ridgewood. Thank you again for being here. I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you. And our 4th candidate is Susan Knudsen.
Good evening, and thank you, League. During this unusual campaign, residents have heard a lot about me. Much has been fiction. Here's the nonfiction part. Before running for office, I sat through years of Valley Hospital hearings. In June 2010, I watched in horror as hundreds of residents were locked out of a planning board meeting at George Washington Middle School. I vowed that if I could help it, that would never happen again. Once on the planning board, I am the Class 1 member presently, I voted against high-density multifamily housing master plan amendments, a costly process pushed by developers. 3 years ago, when hundreds of residents filled this courtroom, spilling into the hallways and filling the first floor, I stood with my fellow residents. I voted against all ordinances to change zoning because we cannot absorb massive overdevelopment being pressed upon us. Ridgewood is a delicious target, and we must fight back. As mayor, my first order of business, as promised, was to repeal Ordinance 3066, which invited developers to tweak our master plan in their favor. No such private application has been made since. Over the next 3 years, we will write a new master plan. Whoever wins this 4-year term will play a big part. If reelected, Mike Seaton and I will ensure that our collective vision of Ridgewood 50 years from now will reflect people's wishes. Are you sure the candidates will do that? The past few weeks have seen a new low in Ridgewood politics. The opposition, lacking anything positive to offer, launched an unprecedented and often grotesque smear campaign against me and my family, church, and even Jamboree Scholarship Fund. All of their accusations are false. Details are available at voteridgewood.com, along with endorsements from every single grassroots organization in town. The results of Tuesday's election will be critical to Ridgewood's future. More is at stake than many realize. Consider the starkly different campaigns you have seen. The choice will be obvious.
Okay, I was just given a note that the candidates have to speak up, or more importantly, speak right into the microphone to get it magnified, amplified. Okay, those are the 4 candidates. Now we go to the first question that the League sent to the candidates. They will have 1.5 minutes to answer, and after they all 4 answer, there will be 5 minutes for an exchange. Question 1, the decision on the Hudson Street parking garage is still on the table. Do you support any of the current proposals, or do you have another vision for increasing parking availability in the central business district? And we're going to start with Ms. Harwin.
I support building a parking garage on the Hudson Street site. This is a clearly needed step, and it has been held up for too long. But I am concerned about the cost of the proposal that the Village Council has selected, up to $11 million for a net gain of less than 180 spots. If there are ways to negotiate down the price or increase the number of spots without adding another level, I think we should do it. But at this point, an imperfect garage is better than waiting another 30 or 50 years. We also need to realize that building the garage will not solve all of our parking problems. We have to walk and chew gum at the same time. Ridgewood has many private parking spots, and spaces at doctors' offices and office buildings sit empty at night. We should explore public-private partnerships to try to make these spots available at night for restaurant goers and shoppers. We need to find off-site parking for Central Business District employees. What about a shuttle from the Gradeon pool lot, which sits empty 9 months of the year? We can find other places to pile snow. I'm open to even more creative solutions, like shuttle buses and partnerships with rideshare platforms. Multiple approaches are necessary to ensure that our Central Business District remains vibrant, accessible to residents, and attractive to both businesses and customers from Ridgewood and beyond.
Thank you. Ms. Knudsen?
I support the current garage design, which fits the lot, fits our budget, and fits within the area aesthetics. We have worked hard. I've been working on this garage since 2015, or actually 2014. The larger garage designs encroached into the street or encroached onto the sidewalk. When I became mayor and Michael became deputy mayor, we decided to take a step back and respect the voters of June 21st, 2016, and understanding that vote was a response to an oversized garage that was sitting in the middle of the street. So what did we do? We took a step back and decided to first rezone the area as an area in need of redevelopment. Making that one change allowed us to, instead of going for a design bid build process, we went for a design bid process. This has put us in the enviable position of negotiating a garage design and price. With the previous council majority spent over $500,000 on garage designs that hopefully will never be built. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 garage designs actually cost us nothing, cost us zero, and now Councilman Hache and I have been negotiating with the garage developers. We're negotiating down the price. We have other mechanisms to pay for this and to offset the cost, but the suggestion that we should go to anything larger than what we currently have planned for the Hudson Street lot is irresponsible and disrespectful of the voters, and also doesn't understand, shows a lack of understanding of the area, in the immediate area, and the traffic congestion in one of the most difficult intersections of the village of Ridgewood.
Thank you. Ms. Willett?
Thank you. Does anyone remember one level down, shovels in the ground? That was the slogan of the group supported by the mayor that ultimately got the funding for the parking garage defeated 2 years ago. Well, here we are 2 years later, no shovels, no garage. The council last week did finally settle on a new design after yet another parking study, but they also authorized spending $25,000 to bring in a financial consultant. We don't have the luxury of time here. We now have 23 empty or soon-to-be empty storefronts, and the lack of parking in town is the biggest factor. The new garage will have about 250 spaces. The existing surface lot has 75 spaces, so that's 175 new spaces. At a cost of as much as $11 million, or $62,000 per space, they will be the most expensive new parking spaces on the eastern seaboard. And we won't even really be adding any parking, because the Brogan and Ken Smith lots, which have been used for years by commuters and others, will be going into construction soon. So we're spending $11 million basically to stand still. We're already at the point at which it's hard to get new businesses to come to Ridgewood, and if we reach the point at which commuters no longer want to move here because of our parking problems, it'll be a major hit to property values. We can do better. If we allow the new garage to extend 6 feet beyond the footprint into the sidewalk, not the street, we can add roughly 60 more spaces, which is not a lot, but it helps. I'd also like to move forward with remediating the town garage site and then repaving and restriping that entire lot, which will also add significant new parking. I think if Allie Harlan and I are elected, it'll be a strong signal to the business community that our parking problems will be addressed expeditiously and comprehensively, and that signal alone could help a lot. Thank you.
And Mr. Seaton?
Thank you. Well, I obviously support the design that the Village Council rolled out 5 days ago. It's 3 stories with rooftop parking. It's 255 spaces. You grab a couple on-street spaces when the 3 of the 4 driveways are closed off on Hudson Street. We're also waiting to hear from the State Historic Preservation Office about adding 25 to 30 spaces at the train station. And we're piloting a kiosk on Chestnut Street parking lot, and the experience in Hoboken has been when they switched from meter heads to kiosks that they increased their revenue by 20% without increasing rates or times, and we're finding the same situation is happening on Chestnut Street. So this could save us this could take us a long way in financing the garage. In November of 2015, there was a non-binding referendum where people came out and voted for some kind of parking structure on the Hudson Street lot, and the response was 2-to-1. They wanted it. And about the same number of residents came out June 21st, 2016, and they said they did not want a garage that comes out into the street. I don't understand how you could go to the edge of the sidewalk without having a sidewalk, because then pedestrians won't have anywhere to walk. So there's other options we've looked at. We've looked at acquiring the town garage property, and we've tried to negotiate with the owner, and they just wanted too much money for it, and we're just going to have to wait and see if we can make better progress on that. But we've worked hard to reallocate spots to employees. We've worked hard to reallocate spots to shoppers and diners, and we've worked hard to maintain our commuter spots, because we have a lot of competing interests in downtown, and it's very important that we are able to serve everyone who visits and works in our community. Thank you.
Okay, now there's going to be 5 minutes where you can discuss among yourselves or
Okay, great. I'm going to start. So first I just want to point out to Ms. Willett that I'm not a member of one level down, shovel in the ground. I've never signed any petition, nor do I know how you, I thought you, very beginning of your opening statement, you said you were going to offer facts, and the fact is you just offered a non-fact. But I did want to ask a question. You stated that the garage that you would design would encroach onto the sidewalk and not impact the street. Is that correct?
Well, it would come, yes, it would come out 6 feet into the sidewalk from the current, where the asphalt meets the sidewalk now, and you probably would have to build out maybe 3 feet or so, and, it depends on how wide you want to keep the sidewalk.
So it encroaches then into the street?
A smidge.
Okay.
I just think we can all be sort of brave about this and add an additional 60 parking spaces.
So here's the problem, and I hope that you'll be able to respond to it, is when we don't encroach onto the street and keep the garage on the lot, we actually add on-street parking, which is the most valuable parking that we have. I wanted to ask, perhaps Ms. Harlan can explain, are you familiar with any other parking options that we might have available to us to offset the cost of this garage?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. Do you have any other ideas about where we might be able to add parking that will offset the cost of the parking spaces that Ms. Willett suggested would be $62,000 per stall? I'm just asking if you have any ideas as to where we might be able to add parking. It's been discussed at some council meetings. Maybe you could elaborate on that.
I previously described in my answer, I think that we need to look at numerous options to add parking downtown. I think that one of them is to explore off-site parking options for Central Business District employees. That would free up a number of spots in downtown Ridgewood that are currently occupied by Central Business District employees who are parking there during the day. Additionally, there are many private parking spots owned by private buildings, doctors' offices, and the like, where if we could explore a public-private partnership for items like that, that would be a great opportunity for restaurant goers at night.
And I want to jump in here and just say, I want to give the current council credit for trying a couple of things that a lot of people have talked about over the years and have never done. One was the valet parking, and one was redesignated Central Business District employee parking. I think we realized that the valet parking effort was not successful, and that allocating more parking spaces in the Cottage Street lot for employee parking ended up really just taking away those parking spaces because they sit empty. The employees are not using them, and then there's several spaces that could have been used by shoppers and diners. But I do give you credit for trying. I mean, it's now we can sort of rule those things out and then move on to other possibilities.
Well, I'd like to respond because we could have just put something together willy-nilly and scored some cheap political points and got a shovel in the ground before the election, but it's our thought that we want to do this right. This is going to be a piece of infrastructure. This is going to be an expensive piece of infrastructure for our town, and it's going to last for 40 or 50 years. So we really need to take a measured approach. We have to look at all of our options, and we have to do this right, not just get it done. And I have a question for Ms. Harlan. I think you said you could get more spots in the garage, and I'm just interested in how you could accomplish that.
One way that you could get more spots in the garage is, as Janice suggested, going into the sidewalk somewhat. Ultimately, in an ideal world, we wouldn't want to go into a sidewalk. But we're not dealing in a world with unlimited resources. Every spot that we add makes the parking garage more efficient. And so when we think about the size of the garage, we want to think about, is there any way we can increase the efficiency of the build by adding more spots in that location?
I'm actually going to jump in, and I'm actually very concerned at these kind of comments, because one of the things we do know is that our traffic consultant, my years of experience, I spent 4 years on the Board of Adjustment, most of that as vice chairman, and I spent the last 4 years as a planning board member, and I work very, very closely with our traffic consultant, who suggested that no more cars than what we are adding, the 180, would be acceptable in that particular intersection. Why? Because on a diagonal, just across the street, the Dayton site will be built with adding almost 200 additional vehicles. We are narrowing the cartway and dumping hundreds of vehicles, multiple trips by those hundreds of vehicles into the space, and it is it's difficult for traffic, it is dangerous for our communities down on Broad Street and all around the Central Business District, it is dangerous for pedestrians, and we remove all on street. This is irresponsible to suggest that we would dismiss the voters that said, find a garage that fits, to suggest that we should be so disrespectful of that election. And I promise you that when we build this garage, we will be able to add parking spaces at the train station, just about 30, and offset this cost. Thank you.
Okay, that's it for this crosstalk. We're going to go on to the next question that the League gave to candidates. They will have a minute and a half to answer. And after the four of them answer, then there will be another session of crosstalk. Okay, the question. In today's world, trust and transparency are issues at every level of government. Engaging the community enhances the political process. What methods or procedures would you implement to increase community involvement in Ridgewood governance? And we're going to start with Mr. Seaton.
Thank you. Well, first we've taken the step to add sunshine, what we call sunshine binders, to our meetings, which have all the background information that the council gets beforehand so we could read it over. And this allows residents who come to the meetings to actually follow along and see the information that we're seeing. Another thing we've done is reached out through social media. And one of the things that I'm most proud of is my service on the Shedler Ad Hoc Committee. Grassroots reaching out to residents directly. Now, this committee was formed to discuss the development of the Shedler property, and we had residents who were neighbors of the property, we had sports groups represented, we had village staff, Councilman Hache and myself were the liaisons to that committee, and it was very tense going in there. There was long-established battles, there were bad feelings, and I was convinced it was not going to work. Fast forward a couple months, everybody started sharing information, everyone started talking, everybody asked good questions, they got good information, and they got honest answers. And at the end of the day, we came up with a plan that everybody could live with. It's not a super sports complex, and it's not leaving it sitting the way it is without doing anything. It's a good compromise. Everybody gave a little bit, and everybody got a little bit. And I was very proud to have been able to bring that committee to a successful conclusion.
Thank you. Next we'll have Ms. Harwin.
Local government works best when residents are informed, engaged, and scrutinize decisions. If elected to serve, I will work to transform how the village shares information with residents. We all know that today most people get their information online, and our village's website needs a major upgrade to communicate better what our village government is actually doing. We should post short, readable, and authoritative summaries of council meetings on our village website, not just on social media. If a document is discussed or presented at a public council meeting, it should be promptly posted on our official village website. Keeping documents in hard copy binders at Village Hall is outdated and insufficient. Videos of council meetings should list the times when each agenda item is presented so residents can skip to the topics they care most about. We should also aim to make council members even more accessible outside of formal council meetings. If elected, I will hold regular office hours so that residents can come chat about Ridgewood issues in an informal setting. Finally, it's common sense that council members should publicly disclose any possible conflicts of interest and recuse themselves. As Councilman Ramon Hache said at the same event when he was running 2 years ago, perception is reality, and even the perception of a conflict of interest can be dangerous. I support strong conflict of interest and anti-nepotism rules because trust and transparency are the cornerstones of good government.
Thank you. Ms. Knudsen.
Great, thank you. So I believe in absolute transparency to instill public confidence and enhance communications to ensure public awareness. So what have we done? We did initiate the transparency sunshine binders, giving unprecedented access to public draft documents and allow residents to follow along with meetings and understand exactly what's being discussed. We hope, this is actually a trial period, and we hope to have that go up online in short order once we work out the kinks. This is something no other municipality is doing in municipal government. It is really a great opportunity to have public engagement and participation and understanding what we're discussing. The second thing I've done, and I started a mayor's Facebook page quite some time ago, and I had a council Facebook page as well. The one thing we've done is really utilize social media platforms in order to convey information and share information forward to members of our community. During my years as a councilwoman and as mayor, I've always forwarded agendas and highlights and by email to residents and also onto the Facebook page, sharing with thousands and thousands of residents important notifications, sharing agendas and highlights, and making certain people are aware. And the public feedback has been absolutely outstanding. Everyone is appreciating the fact that they have more information and they know where to go and what to do. We often put information about E. coli outbreaks, public events, and we believe that we are communicating. And for the record, our website is under renovation right now and hopefully will be launched shortly. Thank you.
And Ms. Willett.
Earlier this year at a council meeting, Mayor Knudsen said that her council was the most transparent council ever. It sounds like you're standing by that. I respectfully disagree. If there were real transparency, residents wouldn't be surprised to learn that the council is spending $1.6 million to buy and renovate the Elks Club next door to create office space for the water department. And they wouldn't be surprised to find that we're spending $633,000 to restore the Shedler House. To me, transparency is a commitment to making sure that accurate, relevant information is readily available, easy to understand, and proactively communicated. The village website should be the one-stop shop for all things village-related because it can be held accountable, unlike individual social media sites. The website should be easy to navigate and have the most relevant information tagged and accessible from the homepage. I also want our village council agendas to clearly specify what is being proposed, with explanatory text if necessary, and we should send them to residents ahead of time. I think the full council, not individual council members, should send out a weekly email, maybe 2 to 3 paragraphs, to highlight what was accomplished at the most recent council meeting. And I want to send short surveys to our residents on issues of significance to get a pulse check on where people stand on things like buying the Elks Club. When there's $40 million worth of badly needed infrastructure improvements to our pumps, pipes, and wells. If we're all working from the same set of facts, maybe our conversations could be more civil and productive. And with more information, maybe our residents will be more engaged, which would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have another 5 minutes of crosstalk.
So, great. I just want to point out that the $1.6 million is coming out of the water utility surplus and not from the Ridgewood taxpayers, and that's actually a very important step that we're taking, and hopefully we'll get to that later. I also just want to say, once again, misinformation. The village council has not authorized $633,000 for the Shedler. I think Ms. Willett being...
$633,000 in spending. That is accurate.
We have not authorized that anywhere, so if you could
Not
show me the
authorized.
documents, I'd be happy
That's fine.
to
So
say I made a mistake.
clearly, being on village council for so many years and being experienced in this, we understand how matching grants work, and I think Ms. Willett is just confused about that.
Matching grants aren't free money. It's still taxpayer money.
Yes, but that taxpayer money is sitting at the county, and so do we want to have, maybe Englewood will take that opportunity. It's going to go to someone. Why wouldn't we want to bring that taxpayer dollars back home? We should be looking for that money. We should be applying. We actually hired a grant writer to make certain that we brought money back to us. That's money that's there.
No, but we have to spend it to get it.
We are paying into our trust fund, the Bergen County Open Space Trust Fund.
Mm-hmm.
We pay into that. But that's a cumulative pot. We should be looking for that money. But just speaking of the idea that we should go back and rely on the village website and not utilize social media platforms is just old school thinking. And we really have the opportunity to do a public outreach and public engagement, and people are more informed. I think that Ms. Willett is probably the only person that was surprised about the $1.6 million.
That is not true. I've done so much door to door. People have no idea. I've met many people who are stunned, like jaws open. I'm sorry. It's just the case.
Well, and the other piece of this is the idea that we're not transparent. I have to say there's so much information out there. We are the most transparent in the history, and I see residents out there shaking their heads because there was a time when documents were actually hidden from village council members. We made a vow to not hide anything from the public, and we have not. And we certainly don't hide things from council colleagues, but maybe Mike wants to jump in.
When Ridgewood residents think about what is transparency and what is access to information, we're not doing comparisons between what this council did versus some prior council versus some prior council before that. We're all thinking about, well, what do we have access to when we look at a corporate website? The websites for where we work, the websites for where we shop. We are used to having easy access to information at the click of a button. One great example has to do with the prior question on parking. The council has been considering parking proposals. None of those proposals have been listed online. Why at a time when the council is considering proposals were those not all made available for everyone to review and opine on? I think it's critical that we provide that information.
I also think if you have your own personal, if council members have their own personal Facebook pages, people have to know where to find them. I mean, you're right that information is available, but it's available in a million different places. People shouldn't have to go all over the place looking for information.
I think it's terrific that information is available everywhere. I think the more information, the more social media platforms are used, and the more information is out there, so much better for the residents. I just want to point out that the parking garage has been in discussion. Our meetings are published. They're published online. That's out there on social media. I didn't see Ms. Harwin at the meeting when the garage was discussed just this past week. So unfortunately, the information is there for anyone who wants to come and visit at our meetings. We're here. There's lots of seats. Sometimes they're empty. You're welcome to come and join us. Mike, did you have something?
Ms. Watt, I'd just like to ask you, you said you'd like to send agendas to residents. How are you going to do that? Through mail?
Sure, email is fine. Not mail, that's crazy.
Do you have everyone's email address?
People can sign up if they want, the same way that people sign up for the
e-notice. Right, and that's what we're already doing that.
You're not sending out village council agendas.
No, I just want to say the reason we don't utilize e-notice for village council agendas and we publish them online is required by law, and we put them outreach. I do email to lots of residents. I don't know, a lot of them do get them all the time. They get them highlights, and a lot of residents email back and say hello. But the one thing I want to say is we do not use e-notice for those purposes because we don't want to overload people's inboxes, and when we have a real emergency and really need to get important information out, we want people to see e-notice as something really relevant and very important for them to look at. Now,
that's fine. There could be a separate set of emails. You could have a separate sign-up.
Oh, that's exactly what I'm sorry, but that's exactly what we have, and that's exactly what we're
on your Facebook page.
I would just like to jump in here real quick and remind Ms. Harwin that we do put items of great interest immediately up on the website. So not everything is going to be very interesting to most of the people, but if we have a big crowd and people are interested, they always get the documents the next day on our website.
And I'm also, did we stop, Pam? I'm sorry. What? Oh, okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to talk really fast. So I really do believe that we go out there and communicate with our residents. We go out through email, social media, and everywhere else. We're communicating. We're doing it right. Thank you, Pam.
Okay, now we're going to go to the questions that were submitted by members of the audience. There are some topics that have multiple questions submitted. I'm going to read one, and hopefully it will address what you were concerned about on that topic. If not, speak to the candidates after we're finished. We will try and not repeat the questions or repeat topics. And I've been told that the candidates have 1 minute to answer the question.
Okay.
If I think the question might be a little more involved, I might give you the 1.5. It's just 1 minute is short. Okay. With the number of empty storefronts on Ridgewood Avenue and in town, what is your plan to work to revitalize the downtown area? And we're going to start with Ms. Knudsen.
Okay, great. So I remember a time being here so long when there were 40 empty storefronts downtown, and now we have about approximately 10. What are we doing? We are working hard to give businesses the tools that they need in order to work and be successful. We're revamping ordinances. We're looking at allowing more types of businesses in our central business district, B1 and B2. We're also just introduced the blade sign ordinance, which will allow businesses to have perpendicular signs. We're looking at different ways to enhance our signage, and also looking at our overall signage program, signage ordinance, which as a Historic Preservation Commission member, I understand the difficulties and restrictive nature of those. So we are really working to make certain. We've also suspended certain ordinances that have made it difficult for businesses to operate. We are working with businesses, getting them through the building department much faster, making certain they have the tools that they need to succeed, and we're also starting to look at how we can work with the building owners and their rents. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Seaton?
Thank you. Well, first we're starting by building a parking garage that will not be battled. The residents will not battle against us, because I've seen this battle go back and forth for 10 years now. It started on North Walnut Street, it went to Hudson Street, and if the council wants to build something that's too big, you're going to have a group of residents come out and fight you. It's going to be static, nothing's going to happen, then there's going to be an election, and then somebody gets voted out of office, and you start all over again. So what we're doing is trying to compromise and build consensus consensus so we could get something done finally. And the next thing we're doing is revamping the master plan. Once we start that, we're going to look at all interested elements of the town. We're going to look at the business community. We're going to look at neighborhoods. So what we're going to do is redo our zoning laws, and we're going to focus on making it more easy and business friendly to bring in new businesses to our downtown.
Ms. Willett?
I just want to say, I think, first of all, there's 23 empty storefronts, not 10. I agree that parking is the most important thing we can do. And again, I just want to say we can revise. I'm very happy to work with the current design. I think we could revise it somewhat and add 60 more spaces. I do think we need to just have a comprehensive review of the ordinances that we have and make them more business friendly. I just suspect that there are many ordinances that date back to the 1970s that are just no longer relevant in 2018. I applaud the current council for creating the Central Business District Advisory Committee, but I'm, concerned that I saw the notice that they're having only the second. It's been 2 years. They're having only the second meeting involving business owners. Those meetings should have started, 18 months ago. So there are things we can do. I think really the main thing is to involve our current business owners more closely in whatever we decide to do about the Central Business District.
Ms. Harwin.
When we think about the struggles downtown, the problem is not signage. Problem 1 is parking. Problem 2, 3, 57 is parking. And so a comprehensive parking solution is critical. Beyond that, we need to update our ordinances. Ridgewood Avenue is zoned primarily for retail. It took almost a year for Arthur Murray Dance Studios, a Ridgewood business, to relocate there because they're not in the business of buying and selling goods. Instead, they offer a service-oriented business. And they incurred nearly $30,000 in legal fees going through the variance process. We need to update ordinances. We know that the businesses that will be more successful in an e-commerce world are not necessarily traditional retail and are more likely to be service-oriented businesses. We want to make sure that Ridgewood is friendly to those businesses, that our ordinances reflect those usages, and that we don't need year-long variance processes and tens of thousands of dollars of legal fees to get there.
Thank you.
Do we have a little crosstalk on that? Do we have a crosstalk on that? I just had a comment, and I wanted to...
30 seconds for rebuttal.
Okay, great. I just wanted to point out that I'm very good friends with the owners of Arthur Murray Dance Studio, and it was exactly 5 months that they got through the process, and there was an issue because of the B1, B2 zone, which is what we're looking at. And instead of having to go through the entire variance process, and I believe that they went through a hearing to make a determination as to whether or not the zoning was appropriate for that use. And that's exactly why we're looking at this, is because of what Arthur Murray Dance Studio went through. But because I know them and actually helped them work through that process, I'm quite familiar that it wasn't a year, it was just about 5 months. And we're happy to say that we got them through the construction process and their permits, and we were giving them the tools that they need so that they can succeed. And we continue to look at the ordinances and work through those. Thank you.
Thank you.
But we're still not necessarily the most business-friendly town that we could be. And I know, for example, little stores like, I think it was Bewitching Bath Company, got a summons. They decorated that little bicycle and put it out on the sidewalk. They got a summons. I mean, that's just not the way to treat business owners. It's hard enough to get people to come in here and operate as a business. We should be friendlier. The first offense, if it's an offense, should at least be a warning, not a summons, in my view.
We've suspended many ordinances for businesses after they came in, and they said there was an issue. There's been A-frame signs issues. There's been so many things that
have to come in with a summons
signs.
I just want to say that I doubt highly that we could issue warnings instead of summonses.
Excuse me. Thank you. Ms. Harwin, if you want to have a few seconds. Otherwise, we're going on to the next question.
I'm happy for us to go on to the next question.
Okay. With this question, I'm going to allow a minute and a half. The village is about to revise its master plan. What specific plans and changes would you look to see included? And we're going to start with Ms. Willett.
Well, I'm going to say I don't know that I necessarily have specific plans and changes, but I think we ought to undertake a very comprehensive process. I know that there was $250,000 in last year's budget for for the master plan. It looks like it was spent. I mean, it was at least incurred. I assume that that's been put into some sort of a fund for ongoing master planning process. But, the idea is we haven't had a master plan, a comprehensive revision in more than 30 years. Ridgewood is pretty much built out, so you could make the case that we don't need to have a comprehensive revision all that often. But now's a good time. It's 2018. The world is changing. The retail sector is under siege. We need to think about what our downtown is going to look like, where people are going to live, where millennials are going to live, where senior citizens are going to live. These things all come to play in the master planning process. You bring in a consultant, and I understand you've hired or at least are looking at a consultant. There's a visioning process with residents. We want everybody on board. We all live here. It's our town. We should all have input into what we end up doing. People have accused me of wanting to make Ridgewood into Hoboken. Ridgewood could never be Hoboken, and I wouldn't want to do that anyway. But things are going to change. The world is changing. People want, they want apartment dwelling near public transportation. That's just what the world wants. And so that's what's going to be happening in Ridgewood. I endorse that. Thank you.
Ms. Harwin?
As Janice pointed out, Ridgewood is mostly built. And so as we think about the master planning process, what I envision is not a village that is radically transformed. What I envision in 50 years is a village that looks largely like what our village looks like today. I think that's what Ridgewood residents want, to maintain the aesthetics of our village. But we do need to update ordinances downtown, as I talked about before, to reflect the usages of businesses that we anticipate being successful in 10, 15, 20, 50 years. We want to identify open space opportunities for recreational usage. Additionally, we want to prioritize senior housing options. It is critical that people who have spent their adult lives in Ridgewood have adequate housing options in their retirement years. And 2/3 of Ridgewood residents who are seniors have concerns about affordable housing options. Additionally, as we embark on the master planning process, I want us to think about green building. How can we encourage building moving forward to be environmentally friendly and sustainable?
Thank you. Mr. Seaton.
Thank you. The previous question got pretty specific about what you would want to look at for a master planning process, specifically to B1 and B2 zones, and what exactly that would entail and what kind of mix of businesses you would allow on the ground floor in the downtown. So I'm not going to rehash that, but I have served on the green team, the Ridgewood Environmental Advisory Committee, and yes, green infrastructure, green building, making things environmentally friendly, rain gardens, all these types of things could be considered in the master plan as an element. There's a housing element. There's your neighborhoods. You go in, the master plan is going to determine what your front yard setback is, your side yard setback. It encompasses everything. There's a Bergen County pedestrian biking plan, and that includes Ridgewood and 12 surrounding towns. It incorporates bike lanes, it incorporates sidewalks where there are none, and it exists. The county engineers took a year or more to put this plan together. That was another meeting that I went to with the village engineer, and we sat down there and we pointed out specific streets in Ridgewood, like West Glen, that doesn't have sidewalks, and it could really use them because it's heavily trafficked. We pointed out where bike paths could connect the duck pond to the biking system in the rest of the county parks to our downtown. So it was a very productive meeting, and these are just a few elements of the master plan that we could look at. We could really get into a specific discussion about zoning, but a minute, it just isn't enough time to cover everything.
Ms. Knudsen.
Great, so thank you. The master plan is something that we've looked at for a number of years, and when we first were elected to village council in 2014, 2015, 2016 budgets, we attempted to get money into the budget for the master plan. We recognized that more than 3 decades ago, this master plan was completed, and it is largely outdated and inappropriate for our future needs. This year, I want to correct Ms. Willett again, that the $250,000 has been spent. It's actually been allocated, and we used a piece of New Jersey statute to spread that over 5 5 years. We haven't actually spent a penny of it yet. The master plan process in terms of reexamination, that's required by law. And what we learned in our last reexamination process, which I was a part of, was that we had over 184 action items, which means there were 184 inconsistencies with our current zoning as it relates to our master plan. And when you have those inconsistencies, you have a problem. Your zoning is no longer matching your master plan. So what are we going to do? There are multiple elements in the master plan. We look forward to a visioning process and to look at those different elements. What are the elements? The elements are our facilities, open space, housing element, historic element, and more. So what we're going to do is really start to look at that and look at the future of the village of Ridgewood and what Ridgewood do we want to leave 50 years from now to future generations. I want to remind everyone that unlike any other municipality in the state of New Jersey, Ordinance 3066 allowed unprecedented access to our master plan to make amendments to it at a very costly process, but that has forever changed the character of the village of Ridgewood with these massive housing developments happening downtown. Thank you.
Okay.
Are we allowing a little bit of rebuttal in this or not?
Yes,
really?
I was going to say 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Oh, fine, okay. Well, so the massive housing developments, we're adding 240 units. Ridgewood already has about 1,000 apartment and condominium units, so this is not a massive over construction of our village. But this is not something we should be fighting about. The master planning process should be an exciting process for Ridgewood. It should involve all of us, anybody who wants to be involved. We've got a lot of smart people in town. People will have great ideas about how they think, what trends are going to affect Ridgewood over the next 30 to 50 years. This could be a very exciting process. I would like to see that you expand your master plan committee, to include more people.
So the master plan advisory committee was formed out of the planning board, and it consists of 4 planning board members who actually took the time to study the master plan process, to interview companies, and to make certain that we did everything right. It was a study process, and 4 members actually to get us through the visioning process, which will be a public outreach. The one thing I wanted to point out is that the overdevelopment that's going on in the central business district has now become the new baseline for any future development that could be born upon through fair share housing and COA. So what we really need to do is understand, and our roads, by the way, cannot absorb this kind of impact. We have to wait to see what kind of impact this will be. Our infrastructure, our Franklin Avenue corridor, our water, etc. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Next question. Our iconic Gradeon pool has long suffered low enrollment for a decade. What are your ideas and vision for the future of Gradeon? And let's start with Mr. Seaton.
Thank you. So one of the committees, ad hoc committees I served on was the Gradeon Ad Hoc Committee. And it actually, enrollment is breaking even, so through membership it's making enough money to sustain itself. What we did was offer an early bird discount, and today is the last day up until midnight, so if you want to get your 10% off Gradeon tickets, get online and buy them through Community Pass. We've decided to, we put together a committee. We power wash the playgrounds, the bathrooms. We want to update the bathrooms. We're looking at how to do that because the site is historic, so we have to be very careful, and we have to have the proper professionals come in to guide that process. We have made the water cleaner. We have increased the chlorine pumps. We have invested some money into Gradeon. We went through with our Parks and Rec supervisor, and he cut down a lot of dangerous trees that were in there. Unfortunately, one was the iconic sycamore tree, but it had to come down. It was a danger. It just wasn't. It wasn't structurally sound. We had 2 professionals look at it. One guy with a tomograph who sonared the inside of it. So we've looked at Gradeon, and we love Gradeon, and we want it to continue. Thank you.
Ms. Willett?
So anybody who knows me knows that Gradeon is basically my happy place here in Ridgewood. I'm still a little bitter. I still go to Gradeon every day. I swim in the summer. I'm still a little bitter that I was not included on that Gradeon committee. I also want to say that the 10% early bird discount does not apply to the senior pass, but the senior pass is only $30, so I suppose that's not that big a deal. Gradeon is what we have, and I know there was discussion years back about turning it into a cement pool. It would be prohibitively expensive. I could get on board with even building another pool somewhere else in Ridgewood if people really want a cement pool. But Gradeon is lovely. I think we should do a better job telling people how clean the water is. I mean, the water is tested, I think, at least once a day, maybe twice a day. We should publicize the results of those tests, because Gradeon is, it's not everyone's cup of tea. I get that. Some people just like a cement bottom pool, but there are those of us who like the pool the way it is. It actually does more than break even. I've looked at, I've really monitored Gradeon from a budget standpoint over the past few years. It makes $75,000 to $100,000 a year. People think it loses money. We don't lose money on Gradeon. Thank you. Sorry.
Ms. Harwin?
Gradeon is obviously iconic here in Ridgewood. I believe that it should be maintained in its present form, but in order to promote usage of Gradeon, I do think it's important that it be clean and that it be communicated that it's clean, because I do think that concerns about that are a deterrent for a number of residents. Additionally, there are a number of residents who are interested in a pool that is a cement pool rather than the Gradeon type pool. And I think that one option that we can consider would be reciprocal partnerships with other municipalities where they have a town pool, so that people from those towns can come and use Gradeon and we can use their pools.
And Ms. Knudsen?
I think we do have some reciprocal programs back and forth already. So I actually am going to say that Gradeon does not lose money. The one thing we did do, aside from the Gradeon Ad Hoc Committee, which I think was absolutely fabulous, and I have to give the Deputy Mayor his due, because I think he served on every Ad Hoc Committee, even the ones that were screaming matches, but everybody resolves everything. We are moving forward with Gradeon with the historic designation. We have Connolly and Hickey, who is a historic, that was already? I barely started speaking. Did you make a mistake on the time?
quick.
I mean, I can
That was a
speak.
quick minute.
Wait, am I done? Oh, okay. All right. I lost my train of thought now, Pam. Okay. In any case, so the one thing we didn't do at the recommendation of Parks and Rec to increase fees to Gradeon, we did not do that. We did not take those recommendations. We really wanted to keep the fees as they were, and we've also offered additional senior discounts, and we've partnered with Age-Friendly Ridgewood, who's also making available to low-income seniors to go to Gradeon. We are doing everything we can to promote Gradeon. We believe in Gradeon, and we believe it should stay exactly as it is for generations to come to enjoy. Now my time is up. Thank you.
Okay, and I just want to say, not maybe exactly the way it is. We really need to redo the bathrooms. There was that the Gradeon survey a couple years ago, and that was the one thing that everybody was very clear on. The bathrooms they're terrible. I mean, I've been swimming there for 52 years. They're the same bathrooms that were there when I started swimming there. So,
and that's the reason we hired Connolly and Hickey, because they're doing the proper, they have to do the proper architectural work for a historic site.
Because
And
it's
so we're
historic.
required, it's a little bit more
Yeah, no,
costly,
I
but we
completely
have to be
understand.
respectful and mindful of historic sites.
but we could move forward a little more quickly on that. That's,
Well, government moves slowly. I have
Yes,
to
it
say it's
does.
painfully slow a lot of times, but government moves slowly.
Okay. Next question. In what ways do you plan to improve pedestrian safety near the schools and in the village? We're going to do a minute, and we'll start with Ms. Harwin.
Pedestrian safety is obviously critical, not only for the children that we have in our community, but also for people of every age, especially seniors. For improvements to pedestrian safety, we need to think about traffic lights and adding them in places where there are critical lacks. Additionally, lighting, so that we have adequate lighting for people who are walking at night, would be important steps to take.
That was so fast. Sorry. Okay. Ms. Knudsen.
Great. So a couple of things we're doing is we're presently partnering with Bergen County to repair and do upgrades to the Franklin Avenue corridor. That will allow us to work with the county. They'll do all the engineering, and we're going to partner and utilize the funds coming from our developers on those overdevelopment sites to upgrade and to make certain that that's pedestrian safety. The other thing that we're doing is we're advancing a program with PSE&G. Some of our problems with lighting is that the lights, street lamps all have to be replaced by PSE&G. So we're trying to work out an agreement agreement with PSE&G. If they give us the lamps, we will replace them, and we will just prorate back and forth in the funding for that. So we're working with PSE&G, we're working with the county, and we are working with our pedestrian-friendly and bike-friendly, I forget what we call it, Complete Streets program. Complete Streets, the incorporation of Complete Streets, to make certain that our neighborhoods are pedestrian-friendly. I will say that safety is number one for all of us, and we take it very seriously.
Ms. Willett?
Obviously, pedestrian safety is very important. You know, one thing I would like to see is more of a police presence in the downtown area. You know, we need, I just think it would help to deter people. You know, cars drive too fast, pedestrians are, you know, they walk along with their cell phones. It's just, you know, accidents waiting to happen. I wish we had more patrol officers. And they could be in cars, that would be fine, but just sort of driving around and seeing what's happening in the downtown. You know, with regard to the schools, you know, a lot of the parents have gotten involved in pedestrian safety, and that, I know at Somerville School we had a parent group that monitored the driveway to make sure that as kids were crossing the driveway into Somerville, you know, cars were held up. So there can be, you know, more community involvement as well to increase. But, you know, I agree with what other people are saying about lighting and, you know, improving the sidewalks in general. And this is going to involve all of us. We all have to be more careful of each other, that's all.
And Mr. Seaton.
Thank you. So I've worked with a group of residents at Ridge Elementary School, going several years, 3 years back, I believe. And you know, some of the things that we discovered to increase pedestrian safety around there are larger, but some of them are smaller things you could do. Freshening up the crosswalks, repainting those, signage, making signage clear, cutting growth and trees away from signs so people could see that. Working with parents who guide cars through the red zone for drop-off and pickup. It really is a community effort, and that's what we did over at Ridge. And Age-Friendly Ridgewood sponsored a walkability study for our downtown. It was one of the things I actually went on. A bunch of us met here in Village Hall, and we walked from here to the train station and then took a bus back. And what we're going to find from that study, the results have come in. We're going to look at that and replace some sidewalks downtown, and also put 3 benches throughout the central business district for our seniors so they have a place to rest if they're walking downtown. Thank you.
And do we have another second? Do we have 30 seconds on that? Oh,
If
sure.
you
'Cause I
wish.
just also wanted to point out the other thing that we do, and I would ask everyone to weigh in on this, is one of the things we do is whenever there's a problem area, we deploy our speed trailer, and we look at those intersections, and we have certain restrictions at intersections as to how we can upgrade. For instance, we can't just add a 4-way stop anywhere because the state of New Jersey has regulations that prohibit that. We have to show proof that this is a difficult intersection. But we dispatch our decoy car, and we deploy our speed trailer, and we do everything we can to slow down traffic. I think everybody is really driving crazy these days, but we've dispatched that, deployed that trailer on a number of occasions to help.
You know, I'm going to say the decoy car fooled me twice. I mean, not that, it's just, you know, everybody now knows it's a decoy car, so it sits there right at their neck, and we know it's empty, and,
Yeah, that we'll use other decoy cars,
That
but it
works.
works. It actually works. It's a great deterrent.
it works, you know, for people who don't come to town very often, and, you know, I'm not saying it's a terrible idea, it's not, but I just, you know, I think we could do better.
Well, we try to do better. We do what we can. And again, we're actually ordering another speed trailer so that we can have a second one to dispatch. And I actually think that we should probably get a third one. And we use those very, very effectively. And that decoy car actually does a world of good because people see it and they slam on their brakes and they get the point that we are. And we also add up enforcement. We increase enforcement.
Thank you.
And I'd just like to add that a lot of things come through the Citizen Safety Advisory Committee. Sometimes people come to council meetings, so there is community involvement, and there are places where people could go if they're having a problem on their street, by their school, anywhere. They could come through our committees, they could come to the council, and we will immediately look at what we can do to resolve it.
Thank you. We're going to go to another question. This one is specifically addressed to Ms. Willett, but then each of the other candidates will have a chance to reply. And we'll do a minute on this. You've made repeated statements about the Shedler House. What do you propose should happen to the structure?
Yeah, that's a really tricky question. You know, funds, in an ideal world, we would have unlimited funding. I'm all in favor of historic preservation, and we would go ahead and restore it, but we don't have unlimited funding, and it's not an ideal world, and it would cost a lot of money. I mean, I know there was a plan, I think the plan included putting copper gutters on the Shedler House. We don't know what we're going to do with the house after it is restored. We don't know what it's going to cost on an annual basis. There's still a lot of questions in my mind about the Shedler House. I don't know if anybody's driven by it lately. I will say that if that house were on a normal street in Ridgewood, like, say, Kenilworth Road, and people bought it and said they wanted to tear it down and build a new house, there wouldn't be any issue. I just think that they would certainly get approval to tear it down. Did George Washington sleep there? Maybe. He slept all over New Jersey. Were there artifacts found there? Probably. There's artifacts found in people's backyards. It's, I hate to be the bearer of doom and gloom, but that's a tough decision to make.
So can I just ask?
It's not historic.
Excuse me.
It's not historic like the Public, for example.
Your time is up, and we're going on to Mr. Seaton.
Well, thank you. I was going to ask, what is a normal street? What do you consider the east side of Ridgewood then? If that's not a normal street, what do you consider that part of town?
That's it's an unusual street with all that acreage around it and everything else.
Here's
it sort of sits alone in that property. If it sat among a whole bunch of houses, sorry, I'm not talking, if it sat among, several houses on a street like Kenilworth Road or Wall 3 or name the street, I think we would feel differently about it, that's all.
Okay, well, here's my response to that. We have a house and some land over at Habernickel on the west side of Ridgewood. We have the stable and some land right here in the middle of Ridgewood. And on the east side of Ridgewood, we're going to have the Shedler House and that property, so we can offer equal programming through our Parks Department, our robust programming that we could offer to all of our residents from east to west. There will be no divide, and everybody will have equal access, because that's what our residents and our taxpayers deserve.
But there's no plan for programming.
Ladies and gentlemen, please. I wanted to point out that I just heard Ms. Willett a few moments ago say that she'd be in favor of putting in a pool, but she wouldn't be in favor of saving a historic house.
I said I could get on board with putting in a pool.
I choose not to be, I don't want to be interrupted as on my train of thought. So I want to say that quite a number of years ago, Arthur Rubel, who was our historian, our village historian, Joseph Plicky, Peggy Norris, to their credit, they worked diligently to submit a request for a certificate of eligibility from the state of New Jersey. The state of New Jersey made a determination that the Shedler House has historic value and issued a certificate of eligibility, and that it is eligible for both the state and national registry. For us to sit here and be so cavalier with the future of that house, they say the house, a historic home gets knocked down once but has to be saved over and over and over again. I think this is a small price to pay for history. This is the history of the village of Ridgewood. Thank you.
And Ms. Harlan, a minute.
I don't have any interest in revisiting the issue regarding the Shedler home. I think that my focus is on what we do with the rest of the Shedler property. We've had this property for about a decade. It was acquired with the idea of being used for active and passive recreational space, and all of Ridgewood should be benefiting from this property at this point. We've had an ad hoc committee that was formed to make recommendations regarding the usage of the property for recreational use, and I think we need to proceed and move promptly so that Ridgewood residents engaged in sports can enjoy that property.
Okay. I think we've had a cross-talk on this one and rebuttal, so we're moving on. Okay, we're going to start with Mr. Seaton. Do you support an anti-nepotism policy? Why or why not?
Ridgewood is formed under Civil Service Title 11A. Civil service is our anti-nepotism ordinance. We don't have to get involved with it because the state does the testing, the state certifies the list, the village manager is a hiring authority and has to hire off that list. That civil service designation takes nepotism, cronyism, and favoritism out of Ridgewood, and the state does it for us.
Ms. Harlan?
The civil service ordinance the civil service rules are not an anti-nepotism ordinance. Those are not the same thing. The need for an anti-nepotism ordinance extends beyond issues relating to civil service hiring. Civil service hiring is just one component of issues where family relationships could potentially come into play. What is critical is that when Village Hall employees are related to council members need to recuse themselves from any discussions relating to the departments that employ their family members. And so we need an anti-nepotism ordinance that is consistent with state law, but that addresses that ongoing concern of participation in decision-making.
Ms. Knudsen?
Sure, thank you. Well, first off, obviously I'm in the crosshairs here. I have recused myself from any department discussions and contract negotiations, but I will say, if Ms. Harwin had been at our recent council meeting, she would have learned that an anti-nepotism ordinance actually conflicts with civil service statutes, rules, and regulations, because you would be adopting an ordinance that actually discriminated against someone based on familial relationships, and that would be contradictory to civil service laws. You could not discriminate against someone based on who they are related to. What would happen if we did, because you have to hire in the pecking order, is the village would be subject to very costly, protracted litigation. That person that was skipped based on that familial relationship would subsequently be hired by civil service. You would be forced to hire the person. The person that was hired in their place would be removed. You would have to be required to make all of their back pay, their longevity, and put them in the pecking order where they belong. So we cannot have that kind of an anti-nepotism ordinance. We do have, by the way, I believe, a nepotism policy and cronyism.
And Ms. Willett?
All right, so I think at last Wednesday night's council meeting there was a misunderstanding about nepotism and civil service. I want to clarify one thing. I know that Mary Knudsen did not hire her own sons, because that is not possible under civil service. I mean, they do come up with a list, the applicants take a test, we have a residency preference that is overlaid on the civil service test results. Nonetheless, Mary Knudsen's sons bubbled up to the top of the list and were hired. That was appropriate within civil service. Other towns have civil service, and they do have anti-nepotism ordinances. We are allowed to have an anti-nepotism ordinance with civil service, and it really is more on a going forward basis. It wouldn't be retroactive to your sons, obviously, but going forward, if there are employees in any department, you can't have the head of that department or a senior elected official, because there's just a conflict of interest there. It affects things like promotions, and if there's any disciplinary issues, it's perception's reality, as was said earlier this evening. We don't want to, as a town. Oh, sorry, I have to stop.
Thank you. Can we just have a little crosstalk? Because I just want to point out that civil service, and there are two separate parts of it: public safety, and then there's civilian and non-civilian positions. So when we talk about overlaying something on statute, that's not true. Statutes are they're unequivocal. They are very, very precise. And the law states that you must have this preference. It is filed under Title A. That is how we are organized. And I know there's a lot of confusion. As a matter of fact, there was some confusion because in a newspaper recently, there was a legislative aide that made a comment, and I believe that the comment now he's probably going to be backpedaling on very short order. You cannot mix and match those different areas. Civil service is complicated law. I would hope that as an attorney sitting to my left, there would have been an interest in looking at the law before making certain statements.
Thank you.
As an attorney sitting to your left, I have looked at the law, and it's quite clear. The residency requirements are something that a municipality may adopt, but are not required to adopt. And the concern that many people have raised about nepotism in Ridgewood has to do with the fact that there was a decision that was being rendered in 2014 about whether to maintain a residency requirement or not, relating to all types of all types of village employees. And so that's the concern there, that a family relationship was not disclosed and that there was participation in the decision.
I would just like to say that It's for civilian positions, for clerk typist, for laborer, for mechanic. If you're organized under Title 11A, the law says you shall have a residency requirement for public safety. There's really no confusion about it except from Ms. Harwin and Ms. Willett and some of their supporters. I think the rest of us get it.
And I'm just going to say that in 2014, we did not make a decision to maintain residency preference for public safety. What we did was we changed an ordinance. We do not affirm ordinances, we amend, and we change an ordinance for civilian hires.
Ms. Willett, do you have any rebuttal?
I just want to say that the fact is you don't have to have a residency preference for public safety positions. That is just inaccurate, and I think that will be cleared up.
I think that our lawyers have weighed in on it.
We voted to eliminate it for civilian positions. We could vote at any time to eliminate it for public safety positions. That's just how that works.
Thank you, please. Next question. A minute and a half for an answer, because it's sort of a two-parter. What makes you uniquely qualified for the village council? And please contrast your philosophical approach to other candidates. And we're going to start with Ms. Knudsen.
So I have served on village council for 4 years, and during that time I've served on a number of boards. I am a member of the Village Planning Board, Historic Preservation Commission, Site Plan Exemption Committee. I am a member of liaison to the Community Access Network and Stigma Free. I am also, by the way, the council liaison to the 4th of July Committee. I am on the Master Plan Advisory Committee, and I am also on the Special Project Task Force liaison. Additionally, I am the official council spokesperson for the Ridgewood Fire Department Adopt a Hydrant program. So I have quite, and I'm probably missing a few things. As a former Board of Adjustment member, I have a unique perspective and am presently the most experienced member of Village Council with municipal land use on the council. So that, given what we're looking at with high-density multifamily housing and other development, is really important moving forward. The one thing I want to say, the difference between me is I believe in civility, and this is where we're going to contrast the difference between me and some other candidates up here. I believe that some of the behavior that's gone on during this campaign is not something that any of us should ever want to engage in. I think it's been a disgrace and a shame on the village of Ridgewood, and I will never engage in that. We have kept a clean campaign, and we have not put anyone in the crosshairs of smear and lies. Thank you.
Excuse me, if you continue to clap, I'm going to ask you to leave. Ms. Willett, would you like me to repeat the question?
The question was, how are we uniquely qualified to serve on the council?
Right.
Right, okay, thanks. Well, so I'm going to say I don't think anybody here is uniquely qualified to serve on the council. But I do think, as I said at the very beginning, I am well qualified. I have an undergraduate degree in economics. I have a graduate degree in finance and corporate accounting. I have lived in the village off and on for 52 years, so I'm very familiar with our traditions. I've served on a number of nonprofit and volunteer organizations. I was a Somerville mom. I was treasurer of RHS Project Graduation twice as 2 of my kids went through the high school. I've served now on the Ridgewood Conservancy. I'm treasurer of College Club. I know a lot of people in town because I've worked in a lot of different organizations. I would point out that, again, I'm not trying to get personal here, but a lot of your qualifications stem mainly from your role on the village council. I haven't served on the village council, but that's only, the last few years. I've really been involved for a very, very long time. Uniquely qualified. Again, I just think because I've lived here a long time, I love Ridgewood. I have a solid view on what I think Ridgewood should look like and who should live here. I know how we should treat each other, or how I think we should treat each other. And I would love to have the chance to bring all that to bear on a village council position.
Mr. Seaton?
Thank you. I attended my first village council meeting sometime in January of 2008. And yes, I was paid to be here because I was a reporter at the time, but I had to pay close attention. I had to dive into the documents. I had to really understand what was happening and then be able to translate that from officialdom into language that people could understand. So I've been doing that. I've been coming to these things now for 10 years. I've served on the council for 4 years. I've served on various committees. I've named so many of them before. And I agree with the mayor 100%. Civility is key, being respectful, listening to people, exchanging ideas. Listen, if somebody has a better idea and they could navigate the system to implement that idea better than I can, let's have that debate. But I couldn't really contrast my philosophy versus, let's say, Ms. Harwin or Ms. Willett, because I haven't seen anything out of their campaign except for smear and lies. So I don't know what their philosophy is. I don't know what they want to do with the village of Ridgewood. And I can't contrast that because I just haven't seen it through the noise.
Ms. Harwin?
As a civil rights attorney, resolving tough disagreements is what I do. Every day I analyze complex issues. I rely on expert opinions and try to bring people together in situations where options and resources are limited. As an attorney, I know that there is nothing easier in the world than just saying no. The hard work is getting things done, and that's what I do. I also have a fresh perspective on things. Running for village council is not an attendance test. We expect more from our village council members than simply having attended a certain number of meetings. We expect vision. We expect an approach to the issues, and that is something that I will bring. Additionally, the way that I resolve issues is through being respectful and collaborative. That's how I practice in my work life, and that's what I will bring to the council. I do not raise my voice. I do not yell. I will not embarrass the people of Ridgewood sitting on the dais. And I also bring the perspective of a young parent and a commuter. And young parents want to be represented on the council. People who have lived in Ridgewood for less than a decade want to be represented on the council. And people who are commuters, who have had their number of parking spots reduced and are facing fees, want a voice on the council. And I will be that voice.
Thank you. No, we're going to move on to another question.
Okay, great.
What single issue, other than the garage, facing Ridgewood voters matters most, and how will you try to solve it? And we'll start with Ms. Harwin.
Taxes. Taxes are an enormous issue. Taxes pose a major challenge to Ridgewood. We all know and have all experienced that taxes have been high and keep getting higher, but it's an even bigger deal now with the federal tax overhaul. It is critical that we shake up the status quo and come up with something better than just what we've done before. If I am elected to serve, my first priority will be to identify ways to control our spend, like exploring shared services with other towns far more aggressively than we have done to date, in order to transform our budgeting process and cut our spend, because it is critical. In order for Ridgewood to remain attractive for people already here and for people thinking about moving here, we need to control our taxes.
Mr. Seaton?
Well, the village's portion of your tax dollar, your total tax bill, is 23.78% this year. In 2014, our portion was 25.48%. So our portion of your tax bill is shrinking. We have identified many shared services. We just entered a shared service agreement with Washington Township to cover fleet maintenance for their cars. We have shared services in so many different departments of the village of Ridgewood, and it offsets your taxes. So we raise about $34 million through taxation, and $9 to $10 million of the rest of the budget comes through shared services, new revenue streams, identifying additional capacity that we have in our town and maximizing that so we can offset taxes. We have to come up with agreements, we have to negotiate with other towns, and then we have to pass ordinances and resolutions to implement those. It does take some time, but we've worked diligently to make sure that we can maintain taxes at a stable level. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Willard, will you answer what single issue, other than the garage, facing Ridgewood voters matters most, and how will you solve it?
I mean, I agree with Ally Harlan. It is taxes, and I'm just basing that on what people say as I go door to door. They all say taxes are too high. Ridgewood has the 17th highest taxes in New Jersey, and New Jersey has the highest property taxes in the country. So, you know, we're not sitting pretty here at this point. We need to look at more creative ways to cut spending so that people can afford to live here. It breaks my heart personally as a resident when you see the sign go up in front of somebody's house that says, "Congratulations, Tara, class of 2018," and a week later the for sale sign goes up because the family can't afford to stay. It's just too expensive. Our budget is very much a business as usual budget. Everything, I've seen, people say, the mayor and her supporters say, things have to go up. There's inflation. Things go up a little bit every year. I don't buy that. I don't think things have to go up a little bit every year. The police budget is up 11% this year. That's more than just a little bit. This budget crossed the $50 million mark for the first time. Again, I just think we can do better. We can look around. We should ask our employees for suggestions on how to cut spending. Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Knudsen.
Great. Needless to say, we do get input from our employees during budget process. I want to say that actually this is a very complicated issue because it's all interrelated. Overdevelopment will impact taxes in the long run. Overdevelopment will impact the central business district. Overdevelopment will impact the cost to taxpayers. Overdevelopment will be a drain on our taxpayers because it's going to require more police presence. So the overdevelopment, property taxes, yes, but we've actually maintained a pretty low either at or below, most years below the state mandated cap. I think the place that people have to look when they're looking at taxes is not here at Village Council. I think they're in the wrong room. They belong over on Cottage Place because that's where we're getting hammered. And for years and years and years, these were 4%, 7%, 6%, 5%, compounded year in and year out. So the price we're paying is for the mismanagement from years past. But we have maintained, this Village Council, in the time that Deputy Mayor and I have been on Village Council, have maintained the lowest possible number of property taxes while still delivering outstanding services and making sure your toilet's flush.
May I respond? May I respond?
Sure.
Okay. What we're hearing is essentially that taxes are someone else's problem. Take it up with the Board of Education. Take it up with the county. Taxes are everyone's problem. Everyone contributes to tax increases, and everyone needs to be responsible with our tax dollars. Just as in families, when your expenses spike in a certain area, you got to cut back in another. That's how it works. And so it is critical that we have a plan and a vision to reduce taxes. I know it's hard. It's not easy to control our taxes, but it is critical.
I'm going to point out that Ms. Harlan hasn't been here long enough to recognize that when there was a 0% tax increase, our roads and our infrastructure was crumbling. We have paved more roads in the past 2 years than in the past 10 years. We have invested in our community, and when we say that we're not going to increase taxes and we're not going to do what we need to do for the village, then we're being irresponsible. What the responsible thing to do is to make certain that the number is appropriate for what we need to get done and to make certain that we are exploring shared services and continuing to increase our revenue streams, and that's how we're keeping taxes low. But we have to recognize that we have statutory requirements that cost us money, and we have no choice out of that.
We're also keeping taxes low by taking $1 million out of the capital surplus into the current operating budget and taking more than $800,000 from the water utility and the parking utility. And if we hadn't done that, our tax increase would have been 5%.
So Ms. Willard clearly doesn't understand, again, this is experience, that we have the right to take certain funds out of the water surplus utility as we are statutory permitted to do, and that is to offset actually for the village of Ridgewood. So that is something that experience tells us that if we understand what we're permitted to do, we should access that money because it belongs to the village taxpayers. Thank you.
We've taken more of that money in the last year than we've taken
exactly
historically.
what we're permitted to take by
Thank
law.
you. Thank you. Ridgewood is known for our schools, downtown, and our trees. Over the years, we have seen a decrease in our tree stock and at the same time budget cuts to the shade tree division. What are your thoughts on maintaining a healthy tree inventory? And let's start with Mr. Seaton.
Thank you. So when I first got put on village council, we were planting 0 trees, not 1 tree. It was verbal moratorium by the previous village manager because more than 200 trees came down in Irene and Sandy. Since my time, well, let's just, because I only have a limited amount of time, last year we planted 221 trees in the village of Ridgewood. So we went through it from 0 to 221, and that's through the work that I did with the Shade Tree Commission, with our volunteers. I worked with our Parks Department, and we were able to find ways to plant as many trees as we can. I'm waiting here back on a matching grant from through Sustainable Jersey, where we could do a tree inventory. We'll have a company come in, they will look at the species of the tree, the location of the tree, and what condition it's in, and then we can have a realistic plan to take care of trees that might be dangerous in heavily trafficked areas by schools, downtown, and we're going to take those down and replace them because we've had money put in the capital budget last year for trees and this year.
Ms. Knudsen?
I have to say, I'm just reminded that I had a resident with a tree problem and I neglected to contact the village manager, so I'm making note to self. I have to say that the deputy mayor and our Shade Tree Commission have just done an incredible and outstanding job, and we owe them a debt of gratitude because this is the first time that we are planting trees and that we are looking at our tree wells. We are investing in this, and we are making certain that our tree canopy is intact and that is enhanced. And one of the things we will go back and revisit at some point is how we can take a look at that tree ordinance, and we'll move forward. But I have to say that the Green Team, the Shade Tree Commission, they are top-notch and have served our community well. I have to say thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Harlan?
So I recognize and very much appreciate the efforts made by Mike Seaton and the Shade Tree Commission in planting more trees in Ridgewood. That is an effort that I will support and continue to build upon if I'm elected to serve on the Village Council, including supporting applying for grants to build more trees in Ridgewood, to plant more trees in Ridgewood.
Ms. Willett?
I don't really have a lot to add to this. I do want to ask one thing about the, you just mentioned the tree ordinance. Are you referring to the tree ordinance that required people to get a permit before they could remove a tree from their own property and pay into a tree replacement fund? Because I think that was pretty unpopular in town. And ultimately you abstained on your own ordinance after spending a long time putting it together. So I'm wondering if you're going to be resurrecting that tree ordinance.
We're not going to resurrect that exact tree ordinance, but we certainly will want to do something in the future that other municipalities have adopted and take a look at it.
The ordinance is going to focus on clear cutting. It's going to be more broad, and developers, people come in and buy a home with a nice property and they want to clear cut the property. So what we want to do is trying to maintain our tree canopy by finding a way to work around it, and they would have to replace some of the trees if they wanted to clear cut their property, or they'd have to put money into a fund through the zoning process where we'd have to plant trees maybe in a park or somewhere else on another street in town. But what we want to do is not make it onerous on the residents, which is what we understood when we got the blowback from that.
Thank you.
I just want to add that my priority would be trees in public places, not trees on people's private property.
You know what would happen if we had all the
221
trees in public places and everyone else cleared cut the property? I'm sorry. So what would happen, Janice?
Excuse me, I'm going to call the end to that question.
I'm sorry.
With the changes in the state and local tax deductions, how do you plan to A, market Ridgewood despite our tax bills, or B, intervene in the state legislature, I'm assuming? And we're going to start with Ms. Willett.
That's a great question, whoever submitted it, thank you. So, I mean, to market Ridgewood, well, Ridgewood is very marketable. I mean, we've got great schools, it's a lovely downtown, we're close to Manhattan. Those three things are not going to change, so we're still very marketable from that standpoint. What we do need to do is do something about our spending. We do need to cut taxes. I agree that municipal taxes are only 25% of our total tax burden. As I talk to people, nobody seems to mind that much that the spending on the schools. That's an investment in what makes us an attractive place to live. They do mind that that our municipal budget goes up every year, and they're not really seeing the results. We've mentioned roads. People, that was the second thing as I went door to door that people complained about. The first was taxes, the second was roads. The roads are not in good shape. The second part of the question was, now I've already forgotten, sorry.
Or intervene.
Oh, intervene in the state, yes. So I know that there's a plan to try to, somehow make municipalities, take it as a charitable deduction. I'm going to say that's a non-starter. That's sort of dreamland. That's not ever going to fly with the IRS. So it's incumbent on us to figure out how we can lower taxes and cut spending.
And Ms. Knudsen.
Yeah, so I think that Ridgewood is very marketable. I think we have a lot of treasures here, whether it's Gradeon Pool, Central Business District, or outstanding schools. And I actually have to disagree. I think that both the municipal end and delivery service is important, that is equally as important to schools. I remember years ago, and this goes back to experience and understanding what the residents want, there was a moment when we thought we were going to eliminate rear yard trash collection, and the uproar was that everybody wanted their rear yard trash collection, so we couldn't save money that way. And I think at one point there was a suggestion to everyone should bag their leaves, and that was going to save money, and there was an uproar over that. So what we learned is that our residents really want quality services, and again, I see everybody shaking their head. We want to make certain that we have a top-notch public safety, that we deliver services, that we have parks and rec, and that things are attended to. Our tax is very flat, and I do think that it's very marketable, Ridgewood, already, and we will continue to work to explore any opportunities with the charitable tax donation.
Ms. Harwin?
The solution to our tax problems is not marketing, and it's not advocacy with the state. It's getting our own house in order. And I do think we need to maintain top quality services in Ridgewood, but still explore shared services with other municipalities. What is happening is that we have every municipality in Bergen County and New Jersey largely providing its own services. And we need to focus on whether we can realize cost savings by sharing services. And that can take multiple forms. If Ridgewood is the most efficient provider, that could be other towns buying into our services. If another town is the most efficient provider, we can buy into their services. Or if no one is efficient, and that may be the case, there are options for consolidation. And so what I would propose is that in serving on the Village Council, immediately reinstate the Financial Advisory Committee and have this be job number one to explore shared services.
Thank you. Mr. Seaton.
Thank you. I'd just like to remind everyone the Financial Advisory Committee still exists. It's just called the Special Projects Task Force. We reorganized it and renamed it, and the mayor and I are actually liaisons to that committee, so we know it's there. We go to the meetings every Monday at the beginning of the month. Our employees, our CFO is aware, and if anything comes down from the state, we will be ready to implement the charitable donations. If it flies with the IRS, or if it doesn't fly with the IRS, then we can't do that. But sharing services, again, is the best way that we could come together and start to lower our taxes. We already have a lot of shared services, a lot of shared service options that are in place right now. So going out and building relationships with communities and who are our neighbors could foster even more shared services. So you start out with something small, and if it works out, then you could build on that relationship, and you could share a bigger service, and you could reduce costs for Ridgewood, and you could reduce costs for our neighboring municipalities. It's all about working together, and that's what we've been doing our time on the Village Council, and that's what we're going to continue to do.
Thank you. Okay, this is going to be the final question. In 2017, the village honored Gay Pride Month by exhibiting the rainbow flag in Van Ness Park. What commitments would you make to the LGBTQ community to honor this month at a local level. And we'll start with Mr. Seaton.
Thank you. So last year we displayed the Pride banner in the Van Ness Square, and it was done by the it was done at the advice of the Community Relations Advisory Board. They had many discussions over a series of months, and that was always the place to display the flag, and that's where we did it. We will do it again this year in June, and it will be in the same spot, prominently displayed at eye level for everyone to see. You can take your picture with it, you can enjoy it, and it'll be there for the entire month. So our commitment is to do it again this year, the same way it was done last year.
Ms. Willett.
So I think I would take things a little bit further. You know, I've said before, everybody knows I have a daughter who's gay. She's happily married. I love our daughter-in-law. LGBTQ plus pride is very important. It's important to kids in our town. It's important that we be an inclusive community. It's important that we send that signal that we value everybody in this town, and flying that flag is one way to send that signal. You know, I was glad that we ultimately agreed to to just post a banner in Van Ness, but I think we can do better than that. I don't see why we can't fly a flag at Village Hall or fly a flag at Van Ness Square. I love the way that the residents in this town kind of got together and flew their own pride flags. That really, you know, I was very heartened by that. It's very important to our community, and I know not everybody agrees, but these signals are so important, especially to our children. And to any gay members of our community, any LGBTQ plus members of our community. So I would support flying the flag at Village Hall and flying it at Van Ness Square. Thank you. With no fuss about it. Sorry.
Ms. Knudsen.
So I appreciate this question. I forgot to mention, the council liaison to Community Relations Advisory Board. And I had a month's worth of minutes, and I rely upon minutes because I could not attend the meetings. They conflict with my schedule, but I had all the minutes and read them. And the decision to have the flag at Van Ness Memorial Park at Van Ness Square is consistent with months' worth of minutes and discussions at Community Relations Advisory Board. I'm proud of that decision. We are an inclusive and welcoming and wonderful village community. And I look forward to our proclamation recognizing June as Gay Pride Month. We should be doing that in May, and we will once again proudly display the flag at Memorial Park at Van Ness Square. This time, I hope that, I think Councilman Hache and Deputy Mayor, we had this idea that we would do more of a celebration, and I look forward to that. I think it's really a great opportunity, and we are an inclusive and wonderful community.
Ms. Harwin?
The signals that we send to our gay and lesbian community members regarding their inclusion in our community is critical. Ultimately, the controversy over the flag landed with a compromise about flying it at Van Ness, but it was the process that got us there that was really disappointing for our village. It's very clear from that council meeting that Deputy Mayor Mike Seaton opposed the flying of the flag at Village Hall, communicated that we'd have to fly a breast cancer awareness flag if we did that, and Mayor Knudsen communicated that this was a road we shouldn't go down. It wasn't a legal prohibition. Legally, we could do it, and there was just a choice made not to do it. I strongly support flying the flag at Village Hall. I'm confident that if I am elected to serve, that the council will vote to fly it at Village Hall in the coming years. But we can do more. And I am proud to be endorsed by Garden State Equality and will continue to advocate for our gay, lesbian, transgender community members.
I'd like to just comment on that 1 second, because I wanted to point out that in 2016, I on Village Council, along with Deputy Mayor, actually flew the flag at Village Hall, but for some reason, and we're still trying to figure out why, within hours, the flag was removed, and we cannot seem to find any documentation. So we grappled with that decision, and that's the reason we grappled with it. And so the decision was made, and I believe that that was the likely reason that this Community Relations Advisory Board requested it be at Van Ness Memorial Park at the public forum space, and I believe that that is the reason. But we actually already flew the pride flag at Village Hall in 2016 proudly. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to go to closing statements. They will be made in the reverse order to the opening statements, and the candidates have 1.5 minutes. And we start with Ms. Knudsen.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, fellow residents, for your interest in the issues, the facts, and the truth. We mustn't return to the time when residents were ignored or publicly insulted, when elected officials and their appointees failed to understand municipal government, leading to costly litigation and wasted tax dollars, when promises were made but not kept. As an example, our previous mayor vowed to do, but did not, include special needs housing in the development projects. I made sure special needs housing would be incorporated into the new apartments. We are awaiting final court approval. On all litigation matters, I've been the lead council member for nearly 4 years. What I've learned will help tremendously in the years ahead. As the most knowledgeable council member on municipal land use, I'm well placed to participate in the Valley Hospital settlement agreement and to see that through. Experienced leadership will be essential in negotiating our affordable housing obligations and our master plan process. Ridgewood Future requires steady, undaunted leadership by those who understand the history and the heart and the soul of our community. More is at stake in this election than many realize. There's no space in this courtroom or village for underhanded attacks, uncivil behavior, or backroom deals. We ended that 2 years ago. Don't let it return. We have been endorsed, Mike Seaton and Susan Knudsen have been endorsed by every single citizen group in Ridgewood. And so we appreciate those endorsements, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Hold your applause, please. Thank you. Ms. Harwin.
My daughters, Lori and Franny, will be members of the Ridgewood High School classes of 2032 and 2035. Most of our years in Ridgewood are still ahead of us. I consider this a strength. I value our town's traditions. That's a big part of why I chose to move here. But my views have not been hardened by the bitter debates in our recent past that seem to be litigated and relitigated over and over again in our rhetoric. And that is vital moving forward, because there are a lot of new and difficult challenges that we need to confront. When it comes to taxes, fees, and local services, there's no way around it. We need to do more with less. Our property taxes already make it difficult for residents to stay here, especially our seniors. We need to do things differently. We all love our downtown. It's an engine for our village economy, and it's where we walk and gather, drop off our kids, run into friends, and have face-to-face interactions that make Ridgewood unique. We need to keep downtown alive. And finally, there's the issue of tone. I truly believe that most Ridgewood residents agree about how council members and how neighbors should talk to each other and treat each other. We can have disagreements, even on major issues, without going to war. In fact, we have to. My name is Alexandra Harwin. I'm running to bring a new approach and a fresh voice to the Village Council, and I hope I'll have your support on May 8th.
Ms. Willett?
Thank you. In my view, we can't afford 4 more years of the current leadership. Our taxes are too high, and I don't see any efforts being made to cut them. We've had a parking shortage forever, and we are still sort of pussyfooting toward building a garage. And it's going to be an expensive garage, and it's not going to really add any parking. Our roads are a mess. I mean, you can talk about, how you've done so much to pave roads, but our residents somehow aren't seeing that. And communication, I still think communication with the council is fractured, and social media is not a good source of information because it's not accountable. There's no accountability, and that is dividing our community. I have a couple of things. Somebody asked me as I was going door to door what I would like to do on my first day. That's a really good question. So one of the things I want to do is, instead of having the council sit up here at the dais where, we don't look at each other, we don't talk to each other, not really, I want us to sit down at a table down on the floor, around a table like a conference table. So we're all next to each other, we're looking at each other. If somebody comes up for public comment, they come sit at the table with us. I think it'll improve the tone of the discussion that happens here at Village Council and among the public. I know it sounds silly, you can all laugh, but I think it could be effective. I want to I want to reinstate the Financial Advisory Committee. I don't know how you can say that it's the same. I mean, if it's the same, why did you do what you did? It doesn't have the same mandate that it used to have. I'd like to reinstate it. I'd like to let it look at whatever it wants to and come back to the council with its thoughts and recommendations. I would like to institute my friend Siobhan Winograd's Ridgewood Rules of Order, which will explain to everybody what protocol is at village council meetings, and hopefully the meetings would go better as a result. And I have a million more ideas. I hope you'll vote for me on May 8th so I can put them into effect. Thank you.
And Mr. Seaton.
Once again, I'd just like to thank the League of Women Voters and everyone for coming out and spending an evening with us. What I've found on my time here serving the village is compromise is important. Compromise is the only way to move things forward. If you dig in your heels as a council and then residents dig in their heels, there's nothing that ever gets done. It just turns into an endless battle, and we go round and round and round. What you have to do is sit down with people. You have to sit down with people from all sides and work with them so that you can move this village forward in a positive direction. Residents shouldn't be looked at obstacles to overcome. Our residents are our partners in this. We all live in this town, and we all live in it together. So what we need to do is come together and communicate, and that's what we've done since my time on the village council. We are building a parking garage. We are redoing the master plan. We're doing so many things that residents have asked to get done for years. The first 2 years on the village council, we had to fight over development. The next 2 years on the council, we got to implement our ideas. We're planting more trees than anyone has planted in the village in 40 years, maybe more. So it's very important to listen, to communicate, and to realize that we're all partners and we all live in the same village of Ridgewood. And again, I'd just like to thank everyone for coming out tonight, and vote Susan Knutson and Mike Seaton May 8th.
I would like to thank the audience for being here. You were not the best, but we'll teach you. I do want to thank the candidates. It takes a lot to put yourself out in front of your neighbors and maybe enemies to propose solutions to issues that come before the council. And I do think that they did deserve applause. I do want to mention that, as you probably know, Election Day is a week from tomorrow. Polls are open 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. Good luck in making your choices. Thank you to the League for arranging this, and I'll probably see you in 2 years.